Jamie has worked in the apprenticeship and skilled trades area for approximately 20 years. She started at apprenticeship office with the Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities as a training consultant. She spent a number of years at the Ontario Ministry of Labour and the Ontario College of Trades as an inspector, and is currently a senior policy advisor with Skilled Trades Ontario.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to present to your group. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning. Well, I am from Skilled Trades Ontario, and we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. We actually came online back in January of 2022 as the successor organization from the Ontario College of Trades. And in thinking about apprenticeship in Ontario, there are, as you're very well aware, many system partners in apprenticeship, and Skilled Trades Ontario is one piece of the overall puzzle in the apprenticeship system. And here is our very specific mandate with respect to apprenticeship and skilled trades in the province. So first and foremost, we have the responsibility for establishing apprenticeship programs. Also, an important aspect of what we do is the assessment of experienced workers who come into Ontario from other jurisdictions, or simply experienced workers who haven't done an apprenticeship program. We, of course, are the body that issues certificates of qualifications, and of course do the renewal of those certificates of qualifications. We maintain a public register, which you may or may not have seen as a feature on our website. And of course, we conduct research into apprenticeship and the skilled trades. So like everyone, like us, I'm sure that you have been bombarded with news headlines about skilled trade shortages and demand for skilled trade workers. So of course, at Skilled Trades Ontario, we are very aware of that, and that certainly comes to inform the type of research that we do. And it has really put a promotional spin on some of the work that we do, and we have definitely taken on a promotional sort of role in terms of trying to attract different people to the skilled trades. Just out of interest, I pulled this information fairly recently. These on the federal government website were showing us the top in-demand trades across Canada, or perhaps this might be Ontario-specific data. Of course, this changes over time, but this is pretty recent data. But in Ontario, we currently have 144 trades that have apprenticeship programs attached to them. 23 of them are compulsory, 121 are non-compulsory. Now, if you've been around for a while, you might remember the days when we called non-compulsory trades voluntary trades. But under Skilled Trades Ontario, we have changed up the language and we now refer to them as non-compulsory. So, of course, historically, the distinction is in a compulsory trade, under legislation, an individual must be either licensed or a registered apprentice to perform the work of that trade. Whereas in the non-compulsory, of course, it's a very desirable thing to have a license and do an apprenticeship, but not legally required. Ontario does participate in the Red Seal program. So what might be interesting for employers to know is that if someone approaches them, looking for work, and they have a Red Seal on their certificate, and this is especially true for the compulsory trades, what has not changed over the years in Ontario is that we fully recognize the Red Seal from other jurisdictions, from other Canadian provinces. However, the holder of the Red Seal is still required to go through the administrative steps of obtaining the Ontario license. There's no assessment, there's no exam. It's an administrative process, but they are required to obtain the Ontario certification. Okay, so I always like to take a quick step back and make sure that everybody is on the same page, because we talk about apprenticeship a lot, but sometimes forget to check it and make sure everybody is on the same page about what apprenticeship actually is. I've certainly been caught short a few times in presentations where, you know, especially young workers were a little fuzzy on the whole concept of apprenticeship. So, you know, basically it's an educational pathway that combines on-the-job training and technical training. The Ontario version, and certainly this holds true across Canada, has apprentices spending approximately 8% of their program on the job. And then depending on the trade, the rest of it is spent in technical training or in-school training. And then that can happen either 1, 2, or 3 times, depending on the trade. Most commonly, that is done as a block release of 8 weeks full-time. But certainly that is only the most common one. There are lots of possible variations on that. A tagline you may be very familiar with, because I think we've been using it for maybe 20 years or more now, the earn while you learn. Certainly apprenticeship is promoted to the potential apprentices as they earn while they're at work. No one's incurring any kind of student debt. So we are still very much using that tagline. Now for employers, often they may be confronted with somebody who's interested in getting into a skilled trade, but who may not have any experience in the skilled trades. So given the current climate of shortages, I don't think anybody really wants to turn away somebody who is keen. So maybe looking at some key non-technical skills as important, which could be as important as having a trades background. So the YMCA in Ottawa ran a really great program and did some studies with employers and came up with this list of non-technical skills that, you know, we encourage potential apprentices to use when marketing themselves. And let me know if I'm going too fast, but I'm aware that time is tight. How does someone become an apprentice? Well, really, it's up to the apprentice to do the job search. They have to knock on doors, or, you know, the modern version of that to find a job. So apprentices are encouraged to do their research, understand enough about the trade to sort of have make an informed decision, go out, find a sponsor. Apprentices are always told that, you know, for some trades in the construction sector, employers have to respect the ratio, that employers have no wiggle room when it comes to the ratio. And if, you know, somebody is looking for work and they're told no, you know, not to take it to heart necessarily. They could be a great candidate. The employer may really, you know, be interested in hiring them. But if the ratio is preventing them from taking on another apprentice at that time, you know, that's not something that is within the employer's control. But if we do get to the happy spot where an employer can sponsor an apprentice, Skilled Trades Ontario, along with the ministry, has introduced an online portal. Now, this is not a finished product just yet, and it will continue to release new phases of the portal with more and more services. But the idea is that over time, apprentices and their sponsoring employers can take care of a lot of business online. So, you know, gone will be the days of apprenticeship paperwork going back and forth in the mail. So right now, here are the services that are available online. And later this year, we will be introducing a new phase of the portal and will introduce more services. There's a few more. Right. Now, employers definitely have some responsibilities when it comes to apprenticeship. Again, as I'm sure that you're aware, the employer is, of course, responsible for providing roughly 80% of the training involved in apprenticeship. So the work-based place training happens at the workplace. The employer, of course, is responsible for making sure that the training follows what's in the apprenticeship training standard and train according to that standard. And the employer, again, keeps in touch with the ministry if anything comes along and changes their ability to provide any training. One thing that I might add to this list that didn't make it is that as an employer, there is the responsibility to release the apprentice for the in-school training portion of the apprenticeship program. Now, that doesn't mean that the employer has to agree right away to the very first offer of school. There's obviously some give and take. If the apprentice comes and says, I've been offered school and it's really not a great time, there is some room for negotiation. But over time, the employer does assume the responsibility of making sure that apprentice can attend trade school. So here's a nice chart that just talks about some of the steps. Assess your training ability. So that's going to be really important when you're taking on an apprentice. And that's a conversation that you'll have with the ministry that is responsible for actually signing up doing the training agreement paperwork with you. Ideally, the employer can provide a good chunk of the training. And of course, everybody understands that not every employer can provide all of the training of a program, and that shouldn't stop an employer from taking on an apprentice. It just means that maybe the apprentice may have to move on at some point to find the rest of the training somewhere else. So there's, lots of ways to do that. Now, again, as an employer, you may have experienced workers who either are already working for you or who are seeking employment. And Skilled Trades Ontario definitely has a system in place to work with experienced workers who are looking to get their trade license, who maybe don't feel that they need to start at the beginning in an apprenticeship. And that is called the Trade Equivalency Assessment Process. So just know, because I know you're here mostly to talk about apprenticeship, but this is also a very important piece of the puzzle for people looking to maybe get licensed in their trade who don't need to start at the beginning. Trade equivalency assessment essentially wants to make sure that the worker has the equivalency in terms of competency and experience as somebody who's done a full apprenticeship. And if the applicant can show that, then they may very well be approved to jump ahead and write the certifying exam. And I am absolutely available to take any questions that you might have about apprenticeship.
That's great, Jamie. Thank you. I'll open it up to anyone, and if you want to maybe raise your hand even or put it in the chat, we can get any of your questions answered by Jamie.
Where is this chat?
I think maybe Louise might have a question.
Oh.
Go ahead, Louise, we can hear you. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Well, Jamie, that's that. Oh, and Max got a question. Go ahead, Max.
Sure. Thank you, Jamie. You mentioned the ratios and the compulsory and non-compulsory trades. I guess from a employer point of view, the ratios in non-compulsory trades seem kind of unfair to the apprentices. So I can have, if I'm a carpenter, if I'm a journey person and I have one apprentice, and I want to have 3,
Mhm.
because those other 3 can do the same work that my apprentice can do, if they can't go to school because I'm only allowed to have a 1-to-1 ratio.
Mhm.
Wondering if there's any interest in, changing in the non-compulsory trades to a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, because I understand from fellow employers that there's a 2-to-1 ratio now in Manitoba.
Oh, interesting. No, I don't disagree with your point at all. It's very valid. The ratios changed about, well, time is a little fuzzy these days. I'm going to say about 4 years ago. In Ontario, the ratios were all over the place depending on the trade. And so about 4 years ago, an across the board 1-to-1 ratio was introduced. At this point, Skilled Trades Ontario no longer has the authority to do anything about ratios. That's entirely within the ministry's control. All I can tell you is that as far as I know, there are no conversations happening around changing them again. But I'll qualify that by saying that I have no insider information. I find out when everybody finds out. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not aware of any conversations to change that.
Great. Thank you, Jamie.
That's great. Thank you. Great question, Mark. Any other questions for Jamie in Skilled Trades Ontario? Okay.
Maybe I'll just jump in because this version of the slide presentation that I guess I didn't review carefully enough was missing one key point that I wanted to highlight was that there are and there always have been some very interesting incentives for employers to hire apprentices. In the past, there were tax incentives. These days, it's more in the form of actual pots of money that are available to employers, through different programs. Now, Skilled Trades Ontario does not administer these incentives, though that still happens through the ministry. So generally, it's federal money administered through the province. It's an ever-changing landscape of employer incentives, but I definitely encourage any employer who has apprentices, who's thinking about getting apprentices, to look into that. Starting with, I would say, look on the apprenticeshipsearch.com website that very clearly explains one of the newer incentives for small and medium employers who hire first-year apprentices, and especially apprentices in certain targeted groups. Great financial incentives exist right now for that, but I'm not going to get into too many details because it's not our program, and I don't know a lot about the administration.
Okay, that's a good seed planted though, Jamie. Thank you. And we're certainly putting resources together for employers. So we will make sure that we include some of those incentives as well in those resources. So thank you. And maybe a good segue to our next speaker. Up next, we have Brian Hoysa from the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training, and Skills Development. I think your name is longer than ours, which is fantastic. Brian, he is an employment and training consultant with the ministry. He joined the ministry in 2009 as an employment and training consultant with experience in a full range of Employment Ontario programs. Prior to joining the ministry, Brian worked for over a decade with the local employment service provider as an employment counselor, a job developer, and program coordinator, delivering programs under the provincial and federal funding. And I am going to hand it over to Brian and let Brian maybe open up his slides if he has. Brian, go ahead, take it away.
Good morning, Kelly. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you just fine.
Good.
Perfect,
I'm just going to share my slide. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie from Skilled Trades Ontario, for your in-depth presentation. You covered a lot of things that I was going to cover, which is great. And congratulations on Skilled Trades Ontario for their 1-year anniversary. That's great, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. So as Kelly said, I am an employment and training consultant. I work out of the Barrie office. I serve the Simcoe County area primarily. And just to jump in, a few things before I get into my formal presentation. Jamie spoke a little bit about what Skilled Trades Ontario does, and there may be confusion on what Skilled Trades Ontario does and what the ministry does. So the ministry currently registers the apprentices. We assess the sponsors or the employers that are applying to become sponsors in the apprenticeship program. We monitor apprentices and sponsors throughout the apprenticeship process to ensure that the apprentices are moving forward through their training program as expected. We work with the training delivery agents. Those are typically colleges, unions, trade organizations that offer the in-school training. And we negotiate seat purchases for in-school training classes based on the need in the labor market. Locally, we negotiate seat plan agreements with Georgian College, which is quite a big seat plan. Mac will maybe tell us a little bit about that later on, but it's a large seat plan. We also administer the seat plan agreement for LIUNA Local 183, which is a large construction union, which has a training center here in Barrie, as well as a large training center in Vaughan. So we do those things as well. We continue to control the wait list for apprentices to attend in-school training. And we manage the achievement incentive, which is one of the grants that Jamie mentioned in her presentation, or at the end of her presentation. So Jamie covered pretty well what a skilled trades is. That was awesome. So that took a little bit out of my presentation. Thank you, Jamie. When we talk about skilled trades, we break them down into 4 separate sectors. So industrial, manufacturing, motive power, service, and the construction industry. We look at occupations in each of those sectors just to give you an idea. So in the industrial or manufacturing, you may see trades such as general machinist, welder, or an industrial electrician, to name a few. Motive power, that would be an automotive service technician, or previously referred to as a automotive mechanic. A truck and coach technician, auto body and damage collision repairer. The service sector can include things like occupations such as hairstylists, cooks, child development practitioners. The construction sectors include general carpenter, electrician in the construction and maintenance field, and brick and stone mason. Most apprenticeable trades require the apprentice to possess a minimum of grade 12 to be registered, and that's important as prospective employers to note, with the exception of the construction trades, which require a minimum of grade 10. So if you're looking at bringing on an apprentice as a sponsor, you want to keep that in mind. Your prospective apprentice should have a minimum of grade 12 or grade 10 if you're in the construction sector. Again, Jamie covered really well what an apprentice is, or what apprenticeship is. Most of the training is going to take place on the job. 85 to 90% of the training is done in the workplace. It's important to note apprenticeship is one pathway to post-secondary education, and I think that's key for us as the general public to remember, as a parent to remember, and of course, as an employer to remember. It is one pathway to post-secondary education. It's not an alternative pathway. It's one of the pathways. Classroom training is done at approved training delivery agents such as community colleges, trade associations, and union training centers. Apprentices are expected to attend in-school training 12 to 18 months after they are formally registered as an apprentice. This is done by design. I always get this question from employers, from our sponsors, and say, when's my apprentice going to go to school? Well, remember, 90%, 85 to 90% of the learning is done on the job. And so 12 to 18 months before they go to school ensures everybody in that level 1 class that they're going to be attending has basically the same amount of on-the-job learning experience prior to attending school. Apprentices and their sponsors receive invitations for the apprentice to attend school. This is also done by design. You are emailed as a sponsor the invitation for your apprentice to go to school. As Kelly mentioned, you do need to release an apprentice to go to school, but it may not be the right time for that apprentice to go to school. Maybe they haven't had the opportunity to learn some of the basic skills. Maybe it's a really busy time for your business and you just can't release that individual to go to school at that time. So it should be a conversation that you have with your apprentice before they accept or decline the seat to go to school. Kelly covered compulsory and non-compulsory trades. It's key to note that there are 23 compulsory trades. As a sponsor in a compulsory trade, it's your responsibility to ensure that anyone who is working in the trade, practicing the skill sets of that trade, is either a registered apprentice or a journey person. And that can lead to legal consequences for both you and that individual. So we don't want to see that for sure. How does somebody become an apprentice? Well, they approach you, you like their moxie, you like the skills that they're bringing, you bring them on, you say, I will bring you on as an apprentice, and they would apply, or you would fill out the application on the Skilled Trades portal, or contact the local ministry office to begin the registration process. As a sponsor or prospective sponsor, I want to talk a little bit about what it is that you need to be able to do. And Kelly covered a lot of the areas. So you need to have the capacity to provide apprenticeship training according to the program requirements. That means you generally possess the tools and necessary equipment, the materials, the processes, and the facilities to support the training of an apprentice in a professional learning environment. You agreed to abide by the stipulated ratios for apprentices and journey persons, and then that's where it's required. There are ratio-based trades, and they generally fall along the compulsory trades. Mac had an interesting question with regard to ratios in non-compulsory trades. You don't, as a sponsor in a non-compulsory trade, wishing to apprentice an individual, you don't necessarily have to have a person with a journey person certificate. You have to be able to provide training, or you have to have the training capacity. So somebody that has the equivalent training experience to apprentice that individual, okay? So they don't necessarily need to be a journey person in that trade. They need to have the equivalency of a journey person.
Hmm.
Did that raise any questions? No, perfect.
That's actually great to know, Brian, because that really increases the opportunity for employers, especially in the construction sector with carpentry, to be able to take more apprentice. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Now, general carpenter is one of those funny ones, which is a non-compulsory, but it's a ratio and average-based trade. So there's always that one instance where the dragon swoops down and grabs that baby, but that's a very odd situation. And I'm going to provide my contact information at the end should anybody have any questions, should they wish to be a sponsor, and they can flesh things out with me and answer some of those questions. Excuse me. So quickly, what's the responsibilities of an apprentice? We covered basically, how am I going to become a sponsor, but what does an apprentice need to do? Well, they need to follow your lawful instructions. They are responsible for learning the required skills of the trade. Of course, they're required for attending the apprenticeship in-class training as required. That's really key, and that goes back to that conversation that I was saying. Once the offer of in-school trainings issued to you, the sponsor and the apprentice, is ensuring, okay, this time might not be good, but remember, if they decline the seat because it's not a good time to go, they're immediately put back on the wait list to go to school. So they'll get an offer for the next available seat. We can't have you continually saying, no, you can't attend school, or we can't have the apprentice continually saying, no, I'm not going to attend school, because that's breaking the apprenticeship training agreement that you as the sponsor are going to sign or have signed, and the apprentice has signed in conjunction with the ministry. At some point, when they're not going to attend school, they're not an apprentice any longer. Let's face the facts, okay? They're also responsible for tracking the training that they required. Skilled Trades Ontario has training standards, or what was previously called logbooks. The training standard or logbook is the property of the apprentice, and the apprentice is responsible for getting those skill sets that they master on the job signed off by their trainer. It's not your responsibility as a sponsor to do so, but I know a few sponsors, one that's going to be speaking later today, who uses the training standard as a performance indicator when they're doing their yearly performance evaluations. So maybe keep that in mind. Yeah, and what are the sponsors' responsibilities? Well, they're responsible for abiding by all the requirements set out in the process in which they received approval to become a sponsor, provide the training and supervision to that individual, ensuring that there is a qualified trainer available to the individual at all times. And we typically use a one phone call rule. So it means an apprentice is able to, in some cases, work on their own. Maybe we'll use a tower crane, or not tower crane, mobile crane operator. I had a call one time and there was some questions about the individual working on their own. If they are trained in the health and safety aspect of the job that they're performing, and they have the skill sets signed off in their training standard of the tasks and skill sets they're performing while alone, and they are available, or they are able to reach a journey person within one phone call or radio call, they are able to work alone. These are very rare cases, so it may be something to keep in mind. As a sponsor, you're also responsible for releasing the apprentices to go to school. That's we've covered a number of times already, and maintaining communication with ministry staff, ensuring the apprentice is aware of their responsibilities. It's key to maintain a working relationship with your ministry staff. When you register an apprentice, you're assigned an employment and training consultant. We are assigned our caseloads based on on the postal codes that we cover. So, sorry. And so if an individual is having some problems on the job, or has moved or left, you need to make sure that you're having communication with your employment and training consultant. If there are problems on the job that are relating to their learning, the ministry staff can assist you to find alternative learning styles, maybe referring to our literacy and basic skills organizations. Those sort of supports are available. I'm being cognizant of the time, so I'm just going to go through a few things quickly. When the apprentice completes all the required in-school training and has all the skill set or mandatory skill sets signed off in their training standard, they can complete their apprenticeship. They will need to provide their ministry contact with some information, including a letter from you, the sponsor, and then they will be issued a certificate of apprenticeship. If there is a certificate qualification exam available, at that point, the individual can pay their examination fee to Skilled Trades Ontario and then book their exam in the local ministry office. Jamie covered the Interprovincial Training Standards or Red Skills program. Benefits to employers or sponsors. Some of the benefits for sponsors to train apprentices include you're sustaining talent within your business and industry. You're training a high quality worker to your standards, which means you're going to get a high quality product. And there are financial incentives available. We can talk briefly about some of the supports that are available. And the first thing that comes up is the Achievement Incentive. And that's one of the incentive programs that Jamie mentioned. The Achievement Incentive is a program that's system-based, and it is designed to encourage apprenticeship training progression. So at one point in time, we were registering apprentices like wildfire. Let's register, register, register. The numbers were showing we had a lot of apprentices registered in the system, thousands and thousands. However, many apprentices were not progressing in their trade. They were not going to attend level 1 in school training, let alone level 2 or level 3 in school training. They weren't progressing as far as learning the skill sets. Basically, they were registered and receiving some of the financial benefits, and the employer was receiving some of the financial benefits, but they weren't progressing to completion. This program is designed to pay an incentive to the sponsor or employer for milestone achievements by the apprentices. So as, for example, as they would complete a level of in-class training successfully, the sponsor would receive a financial incentive. There's up to $17,000 in financial incentives available to employers through the Achievement Incentive. This is based on the apprentices' profile, their progression, etc. Coming from employment services background, I can't leave this presentation without promoting our local employment services. Local employment service providers such as our Employment Ontario services throughout Simcoe County and the Muskoka Kawarthas Employment Services are available to assist employers. They are there to assist you in filling your employment needs. They can help with recruitment and retention of apprentices through job postings, onboarding, and retention programs. They may also have targeted incentives or initiatives available to help you secure the worker you need based on the demands in the local labor market. I've included my contact information here. If you have any questions, please pop me an email at that email address. You can also contact the ministry contact center, or there's a website where you can find our local apprenticeship offices. We've also included the Skilled Trades Ontario website for your convenience. Does anybody have any questions for me?
That's great, Brian. Yeah, well, I'll just open it up here. And if anybody wants to pop anything in the chat, or just unmute yourself and if you have any questions for Brian, please go ahead.
Hey, Brian, is there a place that we can get information about the financial incentives for the employers that are from the ones that you spoke about?
Yeah, actually, will there be resources? I think Kelly said there will be resources available. I'll send Kelly an information sheet on the resources that are available. In addition, each time a sponsor becomes a new sponsor in the apprenticeship program, they're sent a list of the financial resources that are available.
Perfect.
And there's also federal government resources. I just can't speak to them directly because I don't work for the federal government. But on the information sheet, there is a list of the federal government resources. That sheet is also provided to the sponsor and the apprentice when they receive their registered training agreement after they've completed the registration. So it may be overkill, but I want to make sure everybody takes advantage of the incentives that are available to them. So most employers will receive that 2, 3, 4 times from me. And it's not a bad thing to have available, but I'll provide that to Kelly and Sherry, and she can include that in the package.
Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
That's great, Brian. Yeah, thank you. There's a couple of other resources going into the chat as well, so we'll make sure to include those as some of the financial incentives for employers. I'll thank Brian very much. Thank you, Brian, for sharing your email as well. I'm sure if anyone has any questions to follow up with you directly. And thank you for sharing some of that great information. I think the financial incentives are certainly one of those hot topics for employers taking on apprentices. So we'll make sure we get those out to everyone. All right, well, up next, we have a panel discussion with some real employers and people working in the trades. So the next portion, I would like to introduce Matt Reeves. He is going to be the host for our panel discussion this morning. And Matt is the Associate Dean and Campus Principal at Georgian College. So Matt, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce the panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kelly and Brian, for that presentation. And Jamie, I just want to pick up. Brian, you said that that apprenticeship was a pathway to post-secondary, and I absolutely agree. There are sort of pillars of post-secondary education: university, college, and apprenticeship, and they're all at the same value. It's not one above the other. They are all the same. And this is a fantastic opportunity right now for youth to get into apprenticeship. I am very proud. I know we're running out of time, but I'm going to introduce 3 folks that know a lot about apprenticeship. One is John Holloway from Walwyn Electric, and I shout out to John because Walwyn's a huge supporter of the apprenticeship system. Georgian, we train about between 260 and 350 electrical apprentices a year, and Walwyn's always got our apprentices there. So we have John Holloway from Walwyn Electric, Phil Leach, chef extraordinaire. Phil has worked in all over the world actually, and is with Georgian right now, but has had apprentices. And Stacey Hinton, the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Coordinator, the OYAC Coordinator for the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic School Board. So if I could get Phil and and John and Stacy to turn your cameras on. We just have a few questions. I know we're running out of time, and I thought I'd start with John Holloway. John, a question that comes up is, how do you actually train your apprentices for the on-the-job outcomes? And Brian mentioned that you use the training standard as a performance, as a measurement piece. For the folks that are on the line, there are two standards that apprenticeship abides by: the curriculum standard, which is that 15 to 20% that we deliver at the college. Then there's the 80% of the learning that happens that John does on the job. And one of the questions we often get, John, is how do you actually do that training? Do you check it off? Is it, how does the apprentice know what they're doing? Could I ask you that, John?
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Mac. Yes, as Brian mentioned, we do use the training standards as our evaluation tool when we're sitting down with apprentices on an annual basis or even a semi-annual basis. And we'll actually take the time and go through it to ensure that they're understanding what they're being taught and they're actually completing enough of the standard at the time of the term, et cetera. In the field, we have a lot of one-on-one training. We've actually kind of expanded on that, to the point that we'll kind of overstaff jobs just so we have an apprentice there, so the apprentice is able to be a little more time for training. And outside of the one-on-one on site, we've now started actual workshops because we're finding that they need more time to learn. So we'll have 2 or 3 workshops each year to train outside of or more in class and workshop style versus in the field one-on-one.
Great. And Brian, just to give people an idea of the capacity of your company, approximately how many apprentices would you have at any given time at Walwyn? And what are they? Are they all 309A electricians?
Yeah, everybody is a 309A.
Okay.
And we have currently, I believe, about 12 apprentices on staff. And we'll be looking to hire some more come March 1st.
Fantastic. Thank you. Maybe I'll also set that question over to Phil Leach, because Phil is a chef. He's worked in restaurants in Europe and here. Phil, how do you follow that the training standard with apprentices?
Thanks, Mac. So we did base our curriculum around the apprenticeship standard. So the outcomes in our program area are basically broad outcomes based on the apprenticeship standard. And then going further along, when they do their on-the-job training, they would go specifically through that huge checklist based on the booklet provided by Apprenticeship.
Great, thanks. Stacy Hinton, the OEAP coordinator. So the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program through the high schools does allow high school students to get their level 1 while they're in high school. Question for you, Stacy, is what are the employers asking that what kind of talents do the apprentices need to have to be successful with an employer? So if you're trying to choose, who would go into an OEAP program, what are the employers saying is important, before they start their level 1? We know what they need when they're a journey person. We know they've been trained. What do they need in order to be valuable to that employer?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the question, Mac. I think that's actually really, really important. The employers that I tend to liaise with through different committees and things like that all say the same thing, which is really what they're looking for is young talent. There's no expectation that the students come to them with any prior experience, and let's call it what it is. The past few years for our students has been particularly difficult for them to get those social experiences, to have those job experiences. So I would say the best answer to your question would be that the students that are being given the co-op placements really have to demonstrate some soft skills. I'm told consistently by the employers that they will absolutely teach them the hard skills, the how-tos of the trade, but what they're looking for is consistency in terms of a work ethic, in being able to answer questions in a timely manner, to be able to really show the professionalism on the job. And so part of my work with the co-op teachers is really talking about how to prepare the students to not only represent the schools when they're out in the community in these work placements, but also how to best represent the employers. That's wildly important. Before these students put on a Walwyn jersey, and John, I think the last time we signed a student was last year, second semester, so lovely to see you again. They really have to have an appreciation that they are there to learn, but always asking the really good questions. When I sign students to youth apprenticeships, I always deliver that training standard so that the students have an opportunity to really realize what the skills and competencies are. But we stress heavily, stay hungry and ask questions, ask the other apprentices, find out what the workday is like, find out if this is a viable fit for you. And really, depending on the trade and what it's going to entail, we always talk about the courses that would best benefit the student in the high school before they go out to the work placement.
Great, thank you. Phil, maybe a quick question for you. You see apprentices and students every day through the learning environment. You've also seen them in the work environment, Phil. What do you think is the biggest barrier, or why do they not, for those that don't complete, sorry, maybe I should start this again. For those that don't complete, why are they not completing? What do you see as the barrier to completion? Maybe I'll ask that question to both Phil and John. I'll start with Phil.
Well, there's not a lot of barriers in terms of the completion of the skills necessary. I do believe there may be some barriers in retaining some of these apprentices in the positions in the actual restaurants that they are. So sponsors will be having trouble actually retaining them. And especially now, because the industry there, it's so competitive that people are moving around quite a bit. So it's really hard to manage that apprenticeship spot in terms of getting into a journeyman position post apprenticeship.
Right. Maybe John, you see this. I mean, you've got a dozen apprentices. John, of those dozen apprentices, how many do you think will they all complete, or what's your experience with the completion of electrical apprentices?
For us, the success rate's been exceptional. There's really no barriers to stop unless it's something created by the apprentice themselves, I guess. There's lots of encouragement here. The ministry, we sit down with Brian quite a bit, and there's lots of help that they can provide if the apprentice does need help. So really, I don't see there being any barriers. But like Phil says, it's more about retention afterwards that is an issue right now. Yeah.
I mean, we often hear that retention is a bigger issue than say not being able to academically complete the outcomes, but they're say getting out of the trade, or they're just in the end not as interested as they were when they started. Great. Well, I know that we have a bit of a hard timeline here at 9 o'clock, so I think. Kelly, do you want to do a wrap up?
You know what? I would love just to open it up. I think this is a
Sure.
great panel. Just let me ask, just ask the group if anybody has any questions for Phil, Stacy, or John. I think there's already some great connections happening in the chat. I think we might have found jobs for 7 great candidates. So that's great. Thank you, John and Gloria, for making connections. That's brilliant. Anybody else have any questions for the panel?
I think Vincent has his hand up.
Fantastic.
And I'm good for staying after 9. I just know that the meeting said 9 o'clock, so I didn't want to keep blathering on and people have to leave. So
yeah, no, let's get some questions in first. For Vincent, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the great sharing of information. So I do the same role as Stacy Hinton for our school board for Conseil Scolaire Viamont. Hi, Stacy. We're a French language school board in South Central Ontario. And I've asked Sherry if it would be possible to send a link to a really quick questionnaire. And it's just let me just get the link for you. It's just I would like to grow our opportunities for co-op education placements for students in all over in our area that we serve. And Sherry said, yeah, I can do that. So I'm going to send it to you here in the to everybody, put it in the, and it's just a questionnaire, 3 or 4 questions, name, address, website. And what we're trying to do is grow our offerings to support schools in all across South Central Ontario, really, for co-op placements, and particularly in the OYAP program as well. We're I don't want to say we're struggling. We have challenges that are different than other schools where they have a higher density of students in one city. Usually we'll have one high school in Barrie, for example. Our catchment area is quite large. So whereas English boards that have more student bodies will have many schools in one city, quite likely. And I can, I don't know if I'm allowed to share the screen, if I can share my screen.
I don't know, Vincent, if we're going to have time. I'm sorry.
Right.
But
Okay.
The form, yeah, the form is there. Certainly, if there's any employers on today or any other service providers, I'm sure this is a fantastic network of people. So please connect with Vincent. I think I've heard you on the radio too, Vincent. I think you got some radio ads going. So
yeah, there could be. So yeah.
So yeah, that's great. Thank you for reaching out, and I'm sure if anyone is on here today, they can get in touch with you.
Yeah,
can I just
initiate the contact, and we can go from there. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Go ahead, Ben.
I just want to also add on to something that Brian Hoyson mentioned, was that if you are an employer and you may not, and I'm going to use a voluntary trade, non-compulsory trade like carpentry. You may not have a certified carpenter, but you may have 5 or 6 people working for you that have worked for you for years. They just don't have that C of Q. Now that if you would be allowed, as long as you can show that you can do all the training, that you can take an apprentice on, that's a really big opportunity to increase apprenticeship in the non-compulsory trades. So if there are employers out there that, and I know of some who have said, well, I can't take an apprentice because I don't have a C of Q person, but I've got these folks that have worked in the trades for years. That's a fantastic opportunity. And some of those are in Red Seal trades, which opens up the door for more funding through organizations like TILA's. TILA's on with with CLAC. They have some federal funding for the employers. So that's a fantastic opportunity right now to increase the number of apprentices and then skilled tradespeople in Ontario.
There's a question in the chat from Colleen. She said, John mentioned offering additional workshops for apprentices. Do you receive financial support or incentive from the ministry?
Not specifically for that. No, it's we do pay the kids for that, and we pay the trainers and so on and all the setup time.
Thanks, John.
And John, just to build on that, we when they're doing their in-school training, we also have sort of peer tutoring and study groups, especially in electrical and plumbing. So they have an opportunity to stay if they're struggling with code or they're struggling with math. We set up, for the academic piece, study circles for those folks. And they're used, actually, surprisingly, they're used a lot, especially in math assistance and code. So it's great that you're doing it at work because they're experiencing it as well at the school.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. All those additional resources to support the candidates for success. So yeah, thank you everyone. We are right, just a little over time. I did want to just mention 2 other resources for any employees Jamie and Stacy both mentioned non-technical skills for success, and we call those soft skills around here. And we have a 6-module program that can be delivered to any employer and their employees. So we'll certainly include that in our resources. We also have a resource developed here called the Foundational Assessment for the Skilled Trades, which again is assessing communication, math, and science skills, sort of to see what is missing before that employee might get into a skilled trade. So we will make sure to share all of those resources with you as well. I do, conscientious of time, certainly a jam-packed morning. I did promise you a jam-packed morning, and it was. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the apprenticeship webinar for employers. We will, as I mentioned, have those resources available on our website, and we will also have a copy of this video available if you wanted to share it with anybody in your network. We also, just one final thing, have our follow-up survey. Sherry's, we just put that in the chat. We would very much appreciate it if you could complete that survey, as it is one of our deliverables just for the ministry to make sure we're doing the job that we should be doing. So we would appreciate your input. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. We are looking forward to hosting one next week for service providers specifically. But thank you to all of the employers this morning who joined us, and certainly good luck on your apprenticeship journey. Thank you, everyone. Have a great morning.
Have a great day.
Good luck. Bye for now.
Bye.